Good morning. Welcome to 49ers in 5, your daily update on everything happening with the team that you need to know. I am Rob Stats Guerrera. Today is Monday, April 22nd, 2024. Here's what's happening with your San Francisco 49ers. 3 days away from the NFL draft, and the biggest question facing 49ers fans is what happens with Brandon Aiyuk. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk provided a little bit of an update yesterday, and it might leave some 49ers fans very uneasy heading into Thursday's draft.
The truth of the matter very well may be that this process has commenced of Aiyuk's agent having the ability to contact other teams.
Exactly.
And find out whether or not there's even any interest in doing a deal.
Right.
I mentioned T. Higgins earlier. We talked about him.
Yes.
When it came out that he wanted out of Cincinnati, nobody called the Bengals. So if we're going to use this as some sort of a litmus test to figure out what Brandon Aiyuk is worth in the eyes of other teams so he can set his value and his expectations as it relates to the 49ers, this is how you do it. It's very discreet. It's not, I've demanded a trade, because at the end of the day, you're going to be staying put. And Deebo Samuel had to push it to the point where, he's doing this. There's this sign. Deebo Samuel will be a 49er this year, and he's doing this in the club. Like, Aiyuk apparently doesn't want to push it to that level yet. Maybe he will. But for now, there is an exploration happening.
That audio clip was from Pro Football Talk Live. Last week, Florio has an item up that just went on PFT Sunday night talking about Aiyuk and the possibility of a trade. And remember, if Aiyuk's people really are out there looking for a deal, that is very similar to what happened with DeForest Buckner. Once the 49ers realized they could not get a deal done with Buckner, they told his agent to go and find a deal elsewhere. That is what happened. Eventually, the Niners ended up trading Buckner for the 13th overall pick in the draft. We'll see what happens with Brandon Aiyuk. But as Florio points out, just because they gave Aiyuk's agent permission to find a deal doesn't necessarily mean that's bad for the 49ers. If he goes out there and all of a sudden he finds out the rest of the league thinks the way the 49ers are thinking, that could lead to Aiyuk agreeing to a contract sooner rather than later. So this isn't necessarily bad news for the 49ers. It's just kind of a thing that's happening. For the record, remember when A.J. Brown was traded 2 years ago, he went for a first and a third round pick, and he got a new deal from the Eagles. He basically had similar stats to Brandon Aiyuk to that point in his career. So the Niners ballpark should be a first and a third round pick. Oh, man, it is going to be a very eventful 3 days for the 49ers. Remember, John Lynch speaks later today. That press conference probably just got a little bit spicier. We always give you one thing to read, one thing to watch, and one thing you might have missed. One thing to read on this Monday. Apparently, Kyle Shanahan was very inspirational, and not just to other football coaches. Dan Hurley, head coach of the UConn men's basketball team, the back-to-back champion UConn men's basketball team, said his offense was actually inspired by the 49ers and what Kyle Shanahan does. If you want to find out how, click the link in the description of this episode. One thing to watch, in addition to the John Lynch press conference I mentioned earlier, Ross Tucker of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast and Westwood One is going to join us tomorrow. Ross played in the NFL as an offensive lineman for the better part of a decade. I'm going to pick his brain. Who fits for the 49ers? What makes good offensive linemen? And how can we tell if the person they do pick can actually play a little bit? One thing you may have missed, Brock Purdy still busting narratives. I saw this from Sharp Football Stats yesterday. The 49ers had the 5th most air yards on touchdown passes last year out of anybody in the entire league. It went Dolphins, Cowboys, Saints, Vikings, 49ers. 5th most air yards on touchdowns on the league. So much for that idea that Brock Purdy's a checkdown merchant. That's a wrap on today's 49ers in 5. Please rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. If you leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Pods, I promise you we will read it on the show. Click the notification bell so you'll know every single time we go live, which is every single weekday for you. Today, I'll be live with Vish Kumaran, 5 p.m. Pacific time. We'll react to what John Lynch says. We'll react to possibly any developments with Brandon Aiyuk. You are definitely going to want to join us with that. We'll take your questions and comments all night long as well. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. We'll talk later today.